the development of voice over IP. But before doing this, I have to tell you a couple of things. Well, the very first one concerns the last two sessions that are devoted to your group presentations. I've spoken with my colleague, and she was mentioning that we were thinking of making the two sessions together on December 9th, which is a Wednesday at 2:30, and just go through the afternoon. Now, do you have problems with that? Elisa, you have a lecture? Or, okay, how many of you have lectures? So it's two. It's a Wednesday. No, but even a lecture would be enough not to do this. Then if you do not have any other proposal, we have to keep them separately, because we thought it would have been better to have them together, but if it's okay with you, then two groups will present on Wednesday and one will present on Thursday. We can allocate the time schedule like this. I mean, I don't have any problem if you have lectures and exams, fine for me, unless you have other proposal for the Wednesday. Elisa, what do you think? No. I don't think it's possible in the morning because we have lectures as well. So anyway, let's keep them as they are. It was just a way of putting everything together, but we'll sort it out. Talking about the group work, since this is the last time we see each other, because then you have some lecture with Professor Pagani and then you will have the presentation. How should you structure the written part and also the presentation if you want? This is a very brief outline, but just to make things clear and discuss it. First part, the issue. Okay, so you have to clarify what you're talking about, describe the technology, company, regulatory issue that you want to investigate. I still do not know exactly your topics, but I guess that more or less these three cover the whole possible range of topics. So you do not have to really be detailed, for example, on the technology or on the company. Just highlight the most relevant issues with relation to the topic you want to investigate and propose a research question that you want to answer. This is the very first part. Second part, the idea is to understand the supply side. Okay, now, of course, things are different if we are considering a technology, we are considering a company, if you're considering regulation. But the idea is that you should provide some analysis of the market, okay, and of the firm's strategies. For example, but this is just an example, focus on different strategies of incumbents and new entrants. Okay, whether you're tackling a regulatory issue, for example, or the emergence of a new technology, or the history of a company. Okay, who are the competitors of that company? How is the company competing in a specific market as opposed to its competitors? What are the relevant assets, and so on and so forth. Okay. Third part, the demand side. The characteristics of the customers, issues related to market segmentation, price discrimination. Okay, you might want to add, since we are dealing with telecom, something about network effect. Are there network effects? There might not be network effect, okay, but just to make things clear. Of course, this is what you should describe and discuss, adopting a critical approach. So we do not want you to be storytellers in a way. We want you to investigate in a critical way the issue, which might be, again, a technological issue or a company or regulation, okay? You were probably all here when, well, most of all, when the past presentations were made, okay? They were pretty good on average, so we think that that outline might actually be appropriate in terms of developing the specific issues. Keep in mind that you have to provide managerial implications and economic implications related to what you're going to investigate, okay? With specific emphasis on the demand, some of you have asked me, well, what about if we are analyzing an innovative service or an innovative product for which demand is not there? This is not a problem in itself, Okay, what we want you to come up with is an analysis, for example, of potential demand. So a company is developing a new service, a new platform. I'm just making examples, okay? What is the potential demand? How would consumers be characterized, and so on and so forth. Is that clear? Questions on this? Everything is clear. Presentation is due, of course, during the last sessions. The written report is due on the first date of the exam, okay? Which is basically January for everyone, but for exchange students who can take it in December, okay? But still, I mean, January is the official date. So you can hand it in advance, but just to make things clear, that's the official deadline. Okay? Half of your grade will be based on the group work. The presentation counts as actually a highlight of the group work, but we are evaluating what will be written in the paper. Okay, so the idea is that we will provide you feedback during presentation as much as we did last time, so that people can improve upon specific issues and so on and so forth. Okay? Clear enough. Good, just to make things clear. I'm sorry that Barbara is not here today. I'll give you the slides. She was asking me some examples of questions for the exam. Okay? Open-end questions. These are taken from different past exams. These are the type of questions that we want you to answer during the exam. Okay? Of course, this will not be the exact question, but just to give you an idea of what type of Bart you're looking at. They're not very complex. If you've studied enough, they're not very complex. Okay? You don't have to write 10 pages for question, okay? Very often, short answers are actually the most focused one, okay? So, for example, describe technological and regimes, illustrate the competitive dynamics of the telecom industry, and explain when the competition moves from a technology-centered to a consumer-centered maturity. This is a question which asks you to comment upon a specific statement, say if it's true or false, and of course motivate your answer, explain your answer. Okay, so just 3 questions out of different exams to give you an example of what the exam should look like. Okay, you're attending student, you will have a choice of the questions, so you will have to choose 2 questions out of 3 or out of 4. Now we have to see how to structure the exam. Okay, questions on this? Doubts? Comments? Okay. So the lecture is about voice over IP, but last time we saw each other, I had promised that I would have briefly talked about the LinkedIn case that has to do with the social networking. While LinkedIn is very interesting, well, this is the largest online professional social network worldwide, with more than 50 million members. Okay, so we're talking about a very, very big social network, although it has a very specific characteristics in terms of aim and in terms of purposes. It has become profitable since March 2006. And this is good news for social networking sites. Because one of the biggest problems for this particular site, you remember the managerial implication of letting users accessing for free and then charge the use. Well, for some social networking networks, this is not working very much. For LinkedIn, yes. So they're making money out of it. Okay? Do you know where do the money come from in the case of LinkedIn? No idea. You wouldn't invest in that, or? Okay. Of course, as many other social networks, from some advertisement. So you still have banners on the specific website, but most of that, they managed to develop a business model which makes money out of companies. So companies who are looking for people to recruit online pay in order to see different kind of profiles. Okay, of course there are different offerings. This is a very interesting business model. Okay, of course as a user you can access different profiles of different users, but if you're a company there are specific offers that are targeted to the needs of the client. And in this case, the client is a business user. Okay, so for example, I'm an IT software company. I need to understand if there are software programmers that can be employed in my company. I ask LinkedIn, paying a fee, to access the profile of different software programmers. Okay, so this is the idea. And also, you know that in LinkedIn, there is a very powerful system of recommendation, okay, which does not work as the offline recommendation, but it's a way of recommending users that you think are particularly skilled or can be actually particularly profitable for your company. Okay? So companies can also have the rating of the different profiles and understand who they should contact and who they should employ within their own business. There is a very high level of control over the digital identity. So differently from what we've seen in more consumers-oriented social networking, here the identity matters. Actually, it's all that matters in LinkedIn. Okay? You access this particular social networking site because you want companies to know you. You want companies to know your skills, you want companies to know your education level, you want companies to know your work experiences, and this means that your identity has to be as complete as possible. Okay? Plus, users that know someone to the third degree, you remember all the story about the degree of separation, can see his or her profile in full. Other users can see just a limited profile. Okay? And there is also an invitation block feature, although, of course, this is nothing really new as compared to the consumer social networking sites. What LinkedIn is offering is a free service plus 3 paying services, so it is actually discriminating the price somehow. Okay? And LinkedIn is making both personal offers and business offers. Okay? So, sorry. Erano sbagliati i nomi, li ho corretti io. Okay, so the idea is that the company is trying to target different markets according to different needs through the price and through the provision of very specific type of offerings. Okay? Of course, if you're Accenture, you're a very different user than Antonio Ranellucci, than a very small company out there. Okay? Recruiters, so companies who are recruiting people as a business can have access to all LinkedIn users. Okay? Interesting thing, not all LinkedIn users are looking for a job. So we're assuming that this is a professional network, okay? But of course, not all the users that are on LinkedIn are looking actually for a job. But still, companies can see the profile. So the idea is that they can make offering even if the user has not signaled himself or herself as someone who's looking for a job. And this is also a very interesting feature in order to provide feedback, for example, to the user's profiles. And of course, users can find lots of job opportunities exploiting the network. This is true for any kind of social networking website, but with this particular social networking, this is one of the most important features. So you can exploit the community specifically to find a job, to find more job opportunities. Okay? And the system of recommendations very often serves exactly for that purpose. Okay? These social networking sites give value to the users, a very high value, which is actually measurable in a way. Okay? And this is how they made companies pay for the service and how they made profits, beside the usual exploitation of advertisement, which is not always as profitable as such a strategy. 3 pillars drive LinkedIn strategy. The first one, internationalization. Okay? Now, this is, of course, obvious if you think of the global market, if you think of job markets in general, but not lots of recruiters are going international. Okay? Very often recruiting companies, unless they are the most big one, tend to be local or at least national in nature. Okay? There are more than 550 million members in over 200 countries, so we're talking about a big company which is active all around the world, which means that different recruiter companies all around the world can actually find information on potential employees. Okay? Second, we're still talking about a social networking site. So how to enforce network effect, which is actually what gives value to the users and what users are actually willing to pay for, is developing the social aspects of the website. Okay? So are you on LinkedIn? Okay, yeah, so just him? Okay, so you should enroll in that. It's a very interesting social networking site. At the very, when did you get into LinkedIn? Okay, so quite recently. At the very, very beginning, LinkedIn was extremely dry in terms of features, okay? You could just enter the name, educational information, work experience. It didn't have any additional feature. You had pictures, but it was just a really, really professional social networking site. Over time, and after the development of other type of social networks, also LinkedIn started adding features, okay? You can update, of course, your profile. You have messaging functions, although they're not as advanced as, for example, and as exploited as Facebook's or other type of social networking. And this, of course, increases the value of this particular network for the users. And also, an important part of LinkedIn's strategy has been to integrate the open social platform by joining the Google's Open Social Initiative, okay, and create a platform that can be exploited across all partners' social networks, okay, which means that LinkedIn is really exploiting the benefits of having network effects, not only at the level of the users, but also at the level of the partnerships, alliances all around the world. Okay? So it is actually forming alliances with recruiting companies. They, of course, are the ones who are more willing to pay for these particular services and are not just enforcing network effect to be in place across different users. Okay? Users benefit just because they can exchange information about job opportunities, but of course they benefit even more if this social network is linked to recruiting companies. Okay? So I know that by enrolling in that particular network, I can signal my presence not only to LinkedIn users, but also to recruiting companies. Okay? So the idea is that the information is spread around, and this is something that lots of users, especially business users, are willing to pay for. Okay? Very, very interesting model, and actually a winning one in terms of profits. Okay? So we're not just looking at numbers, but we're looking also at the profits that company can make out of this specific social network. Profitability and success of LinkedIn in particular, and more in general of social networking, depend on three main assets, three main characteristics. The first is be focused on a specific service. Okay? So the real winning strategy for social networking such as LinkedIn, this is the most profitable case that we can see around, okay, it is clear what the aims are, okay. It's not a social networking for fun, it's not an entertainment social network, it has a clear purpose, meaning that it's a recruitment tool and somehow a career accelerator or facilitator, at least. Okay? So really job opportunities, information about job opportunities are spread around. Subscribers that pay for this particular service can access data sets. Okay? Of course, also firms that pay Facebook can access the data of their particular users. But in this case, the information is much more valuable. Okay? So you can avoid the cost of searching around for job profiles by looking at LinkedIn, by subscribing to a paying service in LinkedIn. Okay? Of course, they can find the best candidate, or at least try to contact the best candidate. Okay? And it allows users, business users, to target the so-called passive members. So remember that this is also a very important point. Okay? LinkedIn was not born to help people find a job. It was born as a social networking among business people, okay? And then, progressively, it started targeting passive members, so members who were not actually looking for a job, but who could be contacted by different companies. Okay? So this is a very interesting feature of social network like LinkedIn. Second, user-based potentiality is the main asset of LinkedIn. Okay? Now think of cases like Facebook, for example, or like Twitter, although Twitter is a different case. The user base is actually the value added for this social networking. Okay? So most of the information you're willing to pay for comes from the data the user release on the platform. Okay? But in this particular case, the information that you access to has to do with the experience, with the job experience of the users, has to do with the type of expertise, of skills that you can find, okay, in different areas, in different sectors, which means that recruiting company can really extend their network at a very low cost. Okay? And you have to compare the cost of extending the network through LinkedIn with the cost, for example, of extending the network offline. Okay? If I'm a recruiting company, I have to probably locate my offices in another country. I have to start investigating the market in that particular country. If I'm serving specifically small and medium companies, I have to understand the local market and so on and so forth. Okay? And this is a very costly activity. This is also why very often we see intermediaries doing the function of job recruiting as compared to the company. Okay? LinkedIn allows companies to cut these costs. Basically, it allows companies to have access, paying to a network, okay, which can be exploited for their own business. Third, the integration of the website on other platforms. This is also a very important point. Okay, LinkedIn has been incredibly open in terms of technological platforms, in terms of providing different features, in terms of collaboration with other companies, with other users, with other institutions. Okay? And it basically provides tools or technological systems through which the users can develop their network. They can look for a job online, and they do not necessarily have to be on the website, but they can exploit the website in order to have value. Okay? This is really a case of success, and I think it's the most interesting case of social networking sites that actually make money. So it's something that works not only because of network effect, not only because you can exchange information, but also because that information is valuable from the point of view of the users, consumers like us, and from the point of view of the companies. Okay? And particularly companies have the interest of paying for having access to different profiles. Okay? Enough with the social networking side. If we have to think of the fixed telecom environment, of everything we've said so far, of the innovation in this particular environment in terms of services and products, probably the most innovative product has been voice over IP. Okay? Now, what is voice over IP? Voice over IP is not only Skype. Okay? So let's make things clear. Voice over IP is, very simply speaking, the transmission of voice and data over any form of IP networks, okay? Including business networks, so we're talking in particular of local area networks and corporate intranets, okay? And that's where voice over IP is actually making money, not on the Skype type of users market, okay? Now, what voice over IP does is exploiting the technological characteristics of the IP network. I think you remember some, or probably we can briefly recall what the IP systems are characterized by. Okay? What the system does is converting the voice from analog signals to a series of digits, bundles the data into packets, and throw them to the network. Okay? So, very similarly to what any kind of data transmission protocol based upon the IP is doing, okay, the VoIP system is doing for voice services. How can you exploit this technology? What kind of configuration can you have? You think of Skype, okay? How can you talk with people through the Skype platform, software, better to say. What can you do with Skype besides chatting? I mean, in terms of audio signal. Yeah? Okay. So basically you have a computer-to-computer configuration. This is probably what most of us are using. Okay, so I'm talking to a person who's on the other end of the network, who's using very often the similar software that I have, and we just can talk over the network. Or I can call telephone numbers, whether fixed or mobile telephone numbers. Okay? So I can have also a computer-to-telephone configuration, or a telephone-to-computer, according to where the voice comes from. Or I can also have a phone-to-phone configuration, because in the end, very often we associate the voice over IP with the Skype type of technological platform, but if you go in any kind of corporate environment, you talk over the phone exploiting the IP network. So you don't see it, okay? But the voice over IP technological system is underlying very often the corporate intranets, both in terms of computers and in terms of telephone. Okay? What companies often talk about is the so-called triple play strategy. So they exploit the network, the IP network, to do whatever they want. Okay? To see video, video conferencing, to exchange data, of course, and that's the most important usage, and to talk over the phone. Okay? Of course, this is not extremely diffused in the consumer segment of the market because of the competition both from the fixed telephone and especially from the mobile telephone. So the development of voice over IP phone-to-phone application in the consumer's market is competing right now with the mobile environment. Okay? But in the fixed environment, especially in the business market, this is something that is having a big success. Numbers, just to contextualize the phenomenon. Okay? These are the subscribers, this is Europe, and these are the quarterly revenues, okay, in millions euro. So we're talking about a platform or a technology which is increasingly having more and more subscribers. Okay? This is, of course, considering all the European environment. Revenues are growing, and we will discuss this in detail. Okay? Because one of the big problems of voice over IP providers, especially when we think of companies like Skype or Vonage, for example, is that they have very big difficulties in making revenues, in getting profits from the users. Okay? Skype is not doing very well in terms of profit making. Okay? Who's making profits from the voice over IP? Lots of formerly telecom incumbent, cable operators, and other companies like this. Okay? But still, revenues are growing. This is the world. Okay? Data are reliable until 2008, then we have estimates. VoIP subscribers, and more interesting, the red line is the percentage of voice subscribers over total mainline subscribers. Okay? So we are around 16% now, considering the entire world, okay, with very big differences across countries. This tells you also an important issue that has to do with the complementarity substitution effect of voice over IP with other telecom services, okay, both in the fixed environment and in the mobile environment. So the percentage of fixed line subscribers that have or are using VoIP subscribers is 16%, not a very big number, okay, which means that still this technology is not particularly diffused, and this, again, are world figures. Let's look more in details at the countries, okay. This is 2007, and then the projected growth. This is the projected penetration, okay? And the size of the bubbles, of course, represent the size of the market. Look at France, okay? It's been one of the biggest markets in Europe for voice over IP. Germany, United States, Then we have United Kingdom, Italy. This is just penetration rate, so it doesn't have anything to do with revenues or with profits. Okay, yes?
This is not what it's right, right? This is mostly
No, this is voice over IP.
and mostly is it the professional users?
Most of them are actually, well, most of these users stem from the professional companies, so business users. Okay, of course you have also consumers using Skype, so you consider them within the penetration rate, but you have also companies. Okay, so the statistics here might be biased because, of course, the company diffusion rate in different countries is very different, especially in terms of size of the companies. Okay, and as any other technology, if you look at the relationship between adoption of voice over IP systems and the size of the company, you have the usual relationship by which very large companies tend to integrate this system very quickly because they help the organization and the integration of different units, while very small companies tend to be technologically laggards. Okay, so the size of the market can be also reflected in the fact that the distribution of companies in terms of size across different countries is very different. Okay? Not necessarily, because these data not only include VoIP services provided by the telecom operators, okay? They also include VoIP services provided by software providers or by cable operators, which are, for example, pretty big in the United Kingdom, but also in Denmark, although, of course, Denmark is a very small market. France Telecom has been a very aggressive player in the voice over IP market. This is a very interesting case. Okay, because they reacted strongly to the entry of new operators by exploiting the network and launching itself into this specific technology. Okay, we will come back to the description of different business models and type of companies, but of course, investing in voice over IP networks have something to do also with the legacy investments that companies have done before. Okay, so for example, cable operators have been more inclined to adopt these particular systems as compared to telecom operators, because in the end, this particular technology is challenging the traditional voice service. Okay? So for cable operators, that was an additional source of revenues. For fixed telecom companies, that was a possible additional source of cannibalization. And they already have the mobile market out there, which is creating some problems. Okay? But strategies differ very much across different operators in different countries. So, for example, France Telecom was one of the most successful operators in this respect. Okay? Percentage of households. So here we are considering the real consumers market. Okay? Again, this is Europe. Look at France. Look at the Netherlands. Norway. Okay, that's very often an outlier. And then we have countries like Spain, Portugal, Austria, Italy and Germany have more or less the same diffusion rate. Yes?
They actually give people an internet telephone, which has like pre-installed software and Skype-like.
Yep.
And you can call Europe with very low rates. And other people who have France Telecom can go for free.
Which is a good offer. It's something that they were forced to do in a way, because of course they were losing lots of money in the fixed telecom, and they had also quite a lot of competition in the mobile telecom market. But the strategy, of many telecom incumbents has been precisely this. So let's try to offer bundles of products or services which include mobile, fixed. This is also what Italian operators or other operators around Europe are doing. So offering that include mobile, voice, even video sometimes, services, okay, so that we can retain our customers and we can decrease the churn rate, because in the end, everything here, at least for the consumers, come down to prices. Okay? For companies, it's not like this. To the consumer side, prices still matter very much in determining what kind of company you're going to be served from. You had a... Yeah. And I also think, but yeah, you wanted, yeah. I also think, but this is more on the speculation side, that the story of France Telecom is a very interesting one because of the whole process of diffusion of the internet in that country. Okay, France was kind of slow in adopting the internet because it has all the Minitel development in place, and they lost lots of opportunities at the very beginning of the development of the internet, France Telecom included. So my reading of this particular strategy is also trying to avoid the mistake again. So this is an interesting technology. It can be extremely profitable, especially if we look at the business side of the market. Let's get into the market before other operators do so. Okay, so they manage really to be more aggressive and more competitive than Deutsche Telekom or British Telecom, for example, which are the big competitors, at least at the European level. Okay? Because the other important thing when we consider the diffusion of voice over IP networks is that we cannot consider anymore the local or national market. This is a truly global service. Okay? So in principle, we can easily talk to people around the world. Well, easily depending on the quality of service, but still, I mean, this is an important issue. Okay? With the national and local markets, you were more constrained, both in terms of technology and in terms of regulation, of course. So this is really a more competitive market if companies can exploit the benefits of competition. Okay, why the growth of users has been so sustained over time? For a series of reasons, okay, which do not have to do just with costs or prices. Of course, this is a big important part of the story, okay? So if we think of companies that adopt this particular technology, this allows to lower substantially the infrastructure costs and to have more efficient network usage. And this is an important part, okay? After all, it is based on the IP protocol. And one thing that the IP protocol surely does better than the traditional network is the efficient use of the capacity. Okay? 90% savings on the network capacity for each call is really a big cost reduction, okay? Which somehow leads to lower prices. Okay? So this is the very first reason why we have benefits. Of course, the benefits that relates to costs impact on the network services, on the network infrastructure, on the management part of the companies. Okay, so it's not just technical units that can benefit from the existence of voice over IP, and on the whole development of applications, security, and so on and so forth. So the idea is that the cost reduction due to the emergence of voice over IP in the market had really a big impact on different parts of the companies. So it was actually a great opportunity, okay? And in the end, could lead to lower prices. But again, this is a side issue, okay? Efficiency, this has not just to do with intra-firm networking. So business companies were the first one to adopt voice over IP for local area networks, for intranets. But of course, the existence of voice over IP allows also a better use of the inter-firm networking. Okay? Think back of the main objective of the internet as it was developed. Okay? Inter-firm networking at that time was the inter-institutional networking, was the main objective. And this is something that you can achieve more easily if you use voice over IP. So the level of efficiency really increases very much. Costs had to do with the infrastructure development and with the network use. There are great benefits in terms of network management. Okay? And this has to do not very much with the development of the infrastructure in itself, so with the fixed part of the costs, but with the operating costs. Okay? So what I was telling you before, the triple play strategy of different companies allowed them to integrate different type of services over the same network. Okay? So it's not only a matter of having a more efficient network, but the network is efficient also because it allows to exploit the capacity in order to develop different type of services, to provide different type of services. Okay? This has two advantages. First of all, we do not have duplication of the infrastructure, and this is, of course, a big cost saving. Second, the billing processes are more easy. Okay? So this is one of the most complex issues in the telecom environment. We haven't discussed very much the billing systems of telecom companies or in general of network providers, okay? But with the triple play, with the use of IP networks, billing procedures become extremely easier, okay? And technical assistance also become easier. In the end, you have one big infrastructure that can deliver different type of services. So voice over IP is actually the transmission of voice over the internet, but in the end, the real value added is the fact that you're integrating the voice services into a series of other different services, okay? And this, of course, brings about economies of scale and scope and so on. Other benefits. No geographical boundaries, or at least very limited geographical boundaries. This has to do not only with the potential diffusion of the service, okay, but also with the pricing models. So having no geographical boundaries means that companies can implement internet-based pricing models, much more than they can do when providing traditional telecom services. Okay? And also, in fixing the rate of exchange across different international calls, for example, the voice over IP provides very good benefit. Okay? So I can discriminate the prices much more, and this means that I can make more profits for different type of users, okay? We have Skype, which is actually providing the service for free, at least for the PC to PC type of configuration. And then we have other companies that are trying to implement pricing models for the integration of services within business users, okay? So the pricing models are more flexible and can be actually based upon the IP network characteristics, okay? Applications development. Now, we have an innovation, a big innovative service, which has to do with the infrastructure and has to do mostly with the voice part. Okay? So voice over IP means actually transmission of voice over the IP network. But in the end, what companies are benefiting from is the development of new applications. Okay? Applications that integrate very different services. Applications that allow, for example, employees in the companies to be more mobile in a way, okay? That allow an easier management of the company network, okay? Of course, I'm talking very much about the company side because that's where the most of the profits are, especially for this service, okay? But still, this means that companies can actually have a more flexible structure, think also in terms of organizational structure of the company, and this lowers the cost. Platform integration, this is something that is actually developing quite substantially in the market. Mobile voice over IP, okay? And more generally, wireless LAN that are based upon the IP network. So the advent of voice over IP drove a series of applications and was a trigger for a platform integration, okay? Especially between mobile communication and voice over IP. Why is that? Because the big competitor of voice over IP providers are actually becoming mobile operators, right? So there is an incentive to integrate in order to provide an integrated service, which does not mean only integrating voice, video, and data, but also integrating the underlying infrastructure, the underlying network, okay? Both at the level of consumers and at the level of local area networks and business networks. Now, this is something that it's been discussed very much especially in the policy context and at the institutional level in the European Union, but not only that. It is true that the use of the IP network for voice services and for integrated services in general is particularly efficient because it exploits the capacity of the network in an efficient way. But on the other hand, these services could trigger the development of broadband network. Okay? Because once you integrate voice, video, and data services because you're using the IP infrastructure, this means that you would need progressively more and more capable network. Okay? Network with higher capacity, which means that actually this type of services could trigger the development of broadband rather than the other way around. Okay? So as companies are integrating more and more the platforms and the services, they surely would need, in the end, broadband networks in order to sustain all the traffic that has been generated because the platforms have been integrated. Yes?
We have a very interesting example in India about this. There are many Indians who settle abroad, especially in the United States. So many companies have now started offering a phone
Yeah.
by which you can call the United States at very, very low rates.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 2 cents a minute or something. But the back end again is broadband internet. And many of the users who get this phone don't know that they're actually going through a broadband internet to do that. So this is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, actually, this is also a very interesting point that you're making because the fact that we are describing voice over IP as a very disruptive service and as a very radical innovation doesn't really have to do with the perception of the users, okay, of using something different. Because in the end, okay, you're calling through Skype, you're calling through a computer, this might sound a bit different, but if you're calling over a phone, you don't really perceive the difference. Actually, you might perceive in some cases, not anymore, but at the beginning you were perceiving a lower quality of service, okay? But other than that, you wouldn't really see the difference, okay? So it's not a big innovation in the sense that users are confronted with a completely different service. It's a big innovation in the network management part of the story, although, I mean, what we see is the Skype phenomenon. Okay? And companies are actually benefiting very much from that, and they are demanding, they're asking for more and more capacity in their networks, especially because in this way you can actually have a higher broadband diffusion. And then, since we are interested in the economic implication and not only in the managerial implication, well, as a matter of fact, voice over IP increased the competition in the market. Okay? Lower barriers to entry because you have a lower setup costs for the reason that we were mentioning before, because you don't have geographical barriers, and mostly because regulation was not there for the voice over IP services. So when companies started developing voice over IP services, they were not really subject to any particular obligation as compared to other type of companies, okay? Especially telecom operators. This triggered the emergence of a wide variety of operators, which corresponded to a very wide variety of business models. So again, we think of voice over IP as represented by Skype or by telecom operators, okay? But that's not about that. It's just something more, okay? So different business models, different operators started exploiting this service. And this, of course, lowered the barriers to entry. Yes?
When you say that Skype isn't actually the main voice VoIP telecom company,
It's not the only, let's say.
could you describe I'm still not clear, what is the main business model of VoIP companies?
Give me 2 minutes and then come into that. Okay, no, I'm going in more details. Okay? So just to conclude on the cost benefits issue, these systems can deliver the same or sometimes even better quality and reliability than traditional voice systems, talking about the network, not talking about the specific service. Okay? As you might know, at the very beginning of the voice development, quality of service was a big issue. Now it is not a big issue anymore, so incumbent companies cannot really rely on the idea that voice over IP services are not of a high quality. Okay? That's not an issue anymore. So the issues are of a different kind and have to do with the regulation on the one hand and with the legacy of existing investments. Because we have to remember that the existing companies in the network, and now we are going to see in details who are the suppliers besides Skype and Vonage, have made investments in different networks, okay? Whether cable operators or telecom operators. So as compared to IP software providers such as Skype, they had to think about how to reconcile the existing investments with the advent of a new service. Now, who are the suppliers? So let's come to the companies. First, okay, the usual suspects in voice over IP. There are independent specialist suppliers of VoIP software and services, okay, which might be either PC-based or at least primarily PC-based, Skype, Yahoo, and Google, okay, or phone-based. Vonage is the most important example in this respect, okay, developed especially in the US, but it's a big company. What? Yes, and also Yahoo is a VoIP, a voice over IP supplier. They have their own service. Of course, it's less known than Skype. Actually, Yahoo was developed before, Yahoo VoIP service was developed before Skype. This kind of services, okay? And the, let's say, the advancements of that, so not just Google Talk. But they are, of course, well-known companies. They have a very specific business model which relies upon the ownership of a software which is then applied to networks that are in place and that are owned by other companies. Okay, so in the same way in which different internet service providers are operating, they do not own the network, but they're trying to exploit the existing networks. Then we have internet service providers, okay, which are trying to bundle the offer of VoIP services with their broadband access offerings, basically, both for businesses and for customers. Okay? Free Telecom, Fastweb is an interesting case. Fastweb is an Italian company. You wouldn't think of Fastweb primarily for, of course, voice over IP services, but what you were describing before for France Telecom is actually true also for internet service providers. Okay? Very often they're trying to complete and to complement their offering, which has to do with broadband services, with some voice over IP services. These are companies that have not based their business model on voice. This has to be clear, okay? So these are companies that are trying to exploit the new services in the voice environment in order to complement their offering. So very different case with respect to incumbent telecom operators, okay? Third, cable operators, very interesting case. Okay, these companies are always in the business when new services come around. Of course, again, also these companies have not based their business model historically on the voice service. So the interesting thing about voice over IP application is that they increase competition not just in the telecom environment as itself, but in a segment which was dominated by the telecom operators. Okay, so even after liberalization, in the end, voice services were actually in the hands of telecom operators. Okay, with voice over IP, different type of companies which wouldn't have suspected as being involved in the voice business started seeing some potential also in that particular business. Cable operators, well, that's quite easy. They have very big networks. They have broadband networks by definition. Their core business is actually on the video side of the market. And so they're trying to exploit the development of voice over IP in order, again, to offer the service bundled with their traditional offerings. Okay? Two more operators. Well, the first one, here we are the telecom service providers, so traditional companies who are basing their business model on the voice, have been based the model on the voice services have differentiated in the data part of the market and now are increasingly offering IP services, especially for voice, with their broadband plans. Okay? Telecom companies are trying to target small businesses because, of course, they are reliable, they are well-known, they have lots of loyal customers, and residential users by doing what Bart was talking about when he was discussing the France Telecom. Okay? So they have a very big reputation, and they have usually very large customer base. They're not extremely innovative on the IP part of the market, but of course voice is their main business, and that's where they need to invest in order to make money. So exploiting this technology, also telecom operators are trying to get into the market. Okay? Remember that differently from the three operators we've described before, so Skype type of operator, internet service providers, and cable operators, these companies have some problems in terms of regulation because they still are subject to some sort of universal service obligation, although to a different extent from which they used to be. They have a very big legacy of investments, so very often these companies have not invested heavily in the IP network, and they risk the cannibalization. So they're actually offering fixed telecom services in the traditional environment, and voice over IP could actually cannibalize somehow the revenues. And then we have equipment manufacturers. Okay? Now, equipment manufacturers are developing their equipment in order to support different forms of IP telephony. And very often they are operating in conjunction with software providers, voice over IP software providers, in order to develop a platform. Okay? So it's like Cisco system. Well, actually, Cisco is probably the best example in that respect. Nokia is doing something in the voice over IP environment in terms of platform development. The problem for these companies is that, of course, they do not own a network, so they do not have big capacity of network management. Cisco is an important company, but because it has basically the monopoly in the local area networks and internet switching part of the market. Okay, so that's where actually they can exploit their existing position and trying to make money on it. You were asking about business models, so having these operators in mind, okay, what are the business models? So who do you think is making money out of this service, out of this business? And what do you think is happening in the market? Remember that the market is always made of business and consumers. So we're talking about different segments of the market. What is happening? Yes?
Traditional players
Mm-hmm.
I think they can price the customer with a high price just with this complete service.
Okay. Okay, so price discrimination somehow in the market. Okay, let's think about the 5 different operators that we've discussed right now. We can try to distinguish between, on the one hand, VoIP software service providers, okay? So firms that provide PC-to-PC communication, sometimes phone-to-phone through a free software downloading. Think of Skype or Yahoo Voice Messenger. This is how it was called, although it's a kind of an old service. And IP network voice service providers, okay, that apply the technology to the broadband network, and they tend to offer free calls on the one hand and bundles of service that they make pay more money on the other hand. Okay? So Fastweb, for example, which is an internet service provider, Vonage, which is a more related company to the voice service providers. Now, what are the advantages of VoIP software service providers? So how Skype became what actually it did in a relatively shorter period of time. First of all, they compete on a global market. So the market for these companies is really global, and it's global especially because they do not have regulatory constraints, okay, of any kind. They do not have price regulation. They do not have any sort of interconnection regulation. They do not have universal service obligation. So they're just offering a service, okay, which is basically a software that users can download, usually for free, and they can exploit the characteristics of the internet environment. You have some...
Yeah, but the regulatory constraints. I don't know if it's really voice over IP, but when it comes to phone, you're not allowed to have, it's not that easy to have Skype on your phone.
No, okay. Yes, it's true. These are mostly PC to PC VoIP service provider. I totally agree that when it comes to connecting PC to phone, or when it comes to having phone-to-phone software that allows calls to go over other companies' network, things become more complicated because at least you have to contract prices. Okay, so you have to contract some sort of interconnection fees in order to exploit the other company's network. Yeah, yes, but you have still to contract with the existing operators. So it's not the same thing, but it's something like what happens in the mobile virtual operators, network operators environment. Okay, so allegedly you could use all the network, all the broadband network which is out there, but then it comes to the contracts that you can stipulate with different operators in the market. Yes?
I remember when in 2000 this VoIP had just become the big thing. Everything was free. Like they had just dial.com and dialnow.com, and you could call any landline in the world. You just use the software and you could call it for free for however long you want, 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
Then a couple of years later in India, they started introducing regulations and you could not do it anymore. And then came things which became paid, which is still very cheap, but they were no longer free. But this regulatory constraints for 2 years, they blocked the usage of all these softwares in India.
Absolutely. And actually, this is what happened at the very beginning, if you remember, also for the Internet access service. So instead of thinking of the voice over IP, think really of the Internet access. This is exactly the same type of business model that Internet service providers implemented. Okay, so at the very beginning, give away the access for free. And then we see how the business is diffusing. Once the market becomes bigger, not mature, because we are really far from a mature market, then we can try to design different offerings and try to discriminate in terms of prices across different type of users. Okay? One thing is offering this service to consumers, another thing is offering this service, of course, to companies. So the internet environment, which allows to implement pervasive marketing strategies, is particularly powerful for the consumer side of the market. Okay? For the business side, you still need to contact companies, go there and contract in order to have your service on the spot. Okay? Also because very often the market is really dominated by the telecom operators. So it's quite difficult to get into the business market at very low costs. Okay? For consumers, the strategy was exactly the one that characterized the earlier stage of the internet development. So free access at the beginning and then make users pay more and more subsequently. Okay? Of course, they do not have infrastructure costs, but, and we come back to the idea that it's not very easy if you want to have Skype on your phone, they need to exploit other companies' infrastructure, which in the end means forming alliances, forming partnerships, trying to find a way of sharing profits. Okay? If I'm allowing you to have Skype on a Nokia phone with Vodafone, for example, who's getting profits from that? How can we share the profit? Okay? And this is, of course, an important issue. At the beginning, free, subsequently, as you were correctly saying, very cheap services. Where do profit come from? Okay? So still voice is dominated by services that are very cheap, also in the voice over IP segment. So we have to understand where profits can be made. Okay? We have the usual advertising story, but that's not enough. And actually, Vonage, for example, is losing lots of money. Okay? And Skype is not particularly healthy in terms of profits. Okay? Sometimes this particular type of companies can get revenues from other operators that exploit the platform. So in a sense, if I allow you to have a Skype over your phone, you are benefiting because users use Skype, so they generate traffic. So this is good for Skype, but it's also good, for example, for Vodafone. Okay? But still, market power, of course, is an important issue. And the bargaining power of these companies is not usually extremely high. On the other end, you have telecom companies and cable operators who are used to operate, at least for most of their business, in a national market or at least in a geographically limited market. Okay? Are subject to universal service obligations still now. Not, of course, cable operators, but telecom companies see this as a burden. Okay? This is a problem because the prices that you can charge being subject to this particular obligation cannot be as low as the prices that voice over IP software providers are charging right now, besides considerations on profits. Okay? So this is, of course, a problem. They have a clear objective in mind, which is the maximization of the average revenue per user, which is not exactly the objective of the, or it wasn't the objective of the voice over IP software providers at the very beginning. So those companies aimed at creating a big market, okay, as the usual internet-based growth model, if you want. I want to create a big market, I want to exploit network effects, and then revenues will come. Okay? Here, companies were really born with the idea of maximizing average revenue per user. Okay? I have to make profits because I have very high fixed costs, and I need to exploit economies of scale in order to make money. Full stop. Okay? And also, the profits of these companies mostly come from the voice services that are developed on the traditional fixed telecom line or the video services that are developed for the cable operators on the broadband network. Okay? So on the one hand, the constraints and the characteristics of the business model is different. On the other hand, the objective of the companies are extremely different. Okay? And the core business of the companies is very different. Voice over IP software providers were based upon an internet model, an internet environment. Okay? The environment within which these particular companies compete is completely different, even thinking of the offering of voice over IP. And this is why it is very interesting to understand how these companies reacted to the advent of voice over IP. Okay? The introduction of voice over IP by companies like Skype, Yahoo, or Google can be understood in terms of diffusion of an innovative service that might be profitable in the future. Okay? For this company, that was really a big challenge. In terms of competition, in terms of business model, voice is not a very, very profitable market. If you also introduce voice over IP that allows users to call for free, then it becomes really a dead loss. Okay? So how can we try to contrast this? And what did they do? Exactly what he was mentioning before. So try to build bundles of offers that can be developed in the market and upon which I can apply strategies of price discrimination. So let's try to understand how the market is moving around and try to offer voice for free to a specific part of the market and complex offerings that are premium offering to another part of the market. Okay? So this is surely the most interesting thing. The problem is, as I was mentioning, that these services generate a reduction in the average revenue per user. Okay? So you need to contrast this trend to developing new tariff plans, on the one hand, and integrated service offerings. New tariff plans means try to price discriminate across different users. Integrate service offerings have to do with the development of triple play offerings, especially for the business users. Okay? So no discussion on the fact that voice over IP increased competition and reduced prices. That's for sure. Now, this had different impacts on different type of companies, and if we consider VoIP software providers and network operators, traditional network operators, we can see that the impact on these different type of companies has been particularly different. And if we had to think of the impact of this service on these two type of network operators, well, cable operators are, of course, suffering less from these trends, okay? Because in the end, their core business has to do with video services. So this is just an add-on on their strategy. If it works, it's good. It's not particularly costly for them to implement because they have the network, they have the technology, they have the broadband capacity, okay? So this is not really the core business, but for telecom company, this is really challenging the core businesses of the companies, okay? So how these businesses is actually competing with each other is a very important issue. Now, the success of different business models. The largest category of VoIP service providers in Europe are DSL providers, okay? So they account more or less for half of the European voice over IP subscribers at the end of 2007, and for the majority of consumer VoIP subscribers, both in France and in Germany, that are two of the most active markets in this respect, okay? However, it's worth mentioning that in some countries, in particular small countries, cable operators are actually playing an important role. So it's not all about software providers or telecom operators. Cable operators are kind of big in small countries. And network independent service providers, so what I was calling before internet service provider with broadband network, still have an important share of VoIP subscriber both in Norway and in Denmark, which are still small countries but are characterized by an increased competition on the main telecom network market. Okay? So the way in which the market reacted to the advent of voice over IP was enforcing a role for DSL providers in the big European countries and leaving some role to play for cable companies or independent internet service providers in smaller companies. Okay? And this was due especially to the infrastructure that was mostly present in the market. Second, a growing number of European incumbent operators, and we talk in particular of France Telecom, British Telecom, KPN, and Telecom Italia, have responded by introducing their own services. So actually, they didn't really suffer too much from the emergence of VoIP services, but just because they managed to exploit their capacity in terms of network management and their user base in order to develop their own voice over IP services. And in 2007, they accounted for 33% of all European voice over IP subscribers. Okay? So this is a relevant number considering the fact that they also had to maintain their core business in place. Okay? So the other operators, DSL providers, or any kind of cable operators could actually exploit the service as a truly newcomer in the environment. Okay? For this company, it was a matter of managing the substitution complementarity with something that was actually their core business. Two final notes, just to discuss more the success of different business models. The first is that if we look at sheer number of subscribers, in Europe at least, Skype has more subscribers than handset-based voice over IP providers, but the revenues are very low, and the traffic volumes, which is more relevant as an indicator than the revenue, are really modest. Okay? So Skype accounts for just 8% of total traffic as compared to 92% of minutes of traffic generated by handset-based service provider. Okay, so this is something that we really need to bear in mind. So yes, it is very powerful in terms of numbers, but when we look at the actual traffic, let us out the revenues, okay, this is an important issue. The second important point is that if you introduce a service that challenges the existing prices in the market, this affects not only incumbents but also new entrants. So if you make a service more competitive because more companies are offering it, it means that prices are going down for everyone, okay? And profits are going down for everyone. So it's not that just incumbents operators were challenged by the advent of free or very cheap VoIP services, but this was, of course, a problem also for specifically voice over IP software providers, okay? And Vonage, as I was mentioning before, has incurred in losses since its beginning, so basically since its birth, and these losses are growing over time because the services, of course, are becoming more and more competitive, okay? And I leave you with this slide, which gives you a picture of the top 5 European voice over IP providers, 2007, 2006. These are, again, based upon the subscribers, so we're talking about millions. France Telecom, okay. Iliad, another operator in France. United Internet, Germany. British Telecom, Great Britain. Okay? So France really seems to be a quite active and aggressive market on this particular service, and this is not just because of the existence of France Telecom that has had a really important strategy in terms of trying to challenge the existing services. Okay? I had something else to say, but we can stop here since time is running.